Ralph, Janet, thanks for being here. Really appreciate you joining us, and I'm excited to have this conversation. Ralph, before we get into it, say a little bit about your background. Obviously, we know you're on the board at AAMI, but share with folks a little bit more about who you are.
Sure. I've been involved with AAMI, primarily the Sterilization Standards Committee, since for about 20 years, since 2001. I've been a co-chair. I'm a co-chair currently. I have a couple of work groups, and then very involved in standards development, particularly in the area of trying to improve sterile processing. And then as far as my day job, I'm Vice President of Marketing and Regulatory Affairs for Healthmark Industries.
Okay, perfect. Janet, our chairperson, say a little bit
hi,
about yourself.
Robert.
Hello
Thanks for
again.
inviting
Good
us
to see you
today. I'm Janet Prust. I am currently board chair for the AAMI Board of Directors, which is my greatest privilege, honestly, professionally. So, but my day job is I work for 3M Healthcare. I am a global standards director for 3M Healthcare. I've been there for many decades. I'm not going to say exactly how many, but I have, like Ralph, been involved in AAMI standards for many years. It's also been an extremely gratifying professional experience, and appreciate the opportunity today to talk more about that.
Excellent. And of course, joined by Amanda Benedict, our VP of Standards. So I think neither one of us need an introduction, so we'll just dive in. People know who we are, but so we wanted to talk about the application of standards in the end user setting, in the healthcare setting. So by Sterile Processing Professionals, by HTM Professionals, et cetera. But let's start with sterile processing, because that's where you guys both have deep expertise and involvement over the years. How have AAMI standards and other standards changed the practice or the field sterile processing in healthcare?
So, when I started 20 years ago with AAMI, sterilization as a profession was often looked at as almost glorified dishwashers, if you'll say. And so what has been so important with AAMI and the contribution of AAMI to the profession is to develop best practices. So like I don't want to throw a lot of numbers at you, but ST79, ST91's coming out. We're spending time on the water quality document right now. All of these things are helping to elevate the profession and set best practices in the area of sterile processing, and that's helping to elevate the people that are in that profession, because now they've got some ammunition when they're dealing with a C-suite. So I think that's been one of the biggest contributions of AAMI sterilization standards and standards in general.
So Janet, what's your perspective on that? How does that impact the whole regulatory framework, all of those kinds of
Well,
things?
I'll add on to that. It's absolutely done that. I've had exactly that same experience, and you can talk to any of the users that are here this week in Sterilization Standards Week, and they would reiterate that as well. And how it does it is by creating a standardization of practices based on the most current information, whether it's the evidence, it's scientific information, it's learnings of people, experts in the profession, of what are the best ways to approach that. And what it drives is it drives then your own individual facility policy to be able to adopt these standards. So it creates the standard of practice, and you have that benefit because then the regulators and the compliance auditors are coming in and looking for that level of standard of practice. But if there's not a document, like an AAMI standard, to reference your policies to, it's not as effective. But what we've seen in the sterile processing area, it's made a huge difference, a really big difference of getting that recognition, as Ralph says, from the C-suite, but also from the auditors that come in. So if you've based your policy on AAMI standards, you have a much higher likelihood that you'll fly through that audit. So it's elevating the profession, it's elevating the recognition of, it could potentially, of HTMs. It's certainly done that for sterile processing personnel. But the most important part of this is it's improving your practices for the patients, right? That's what we're all aiming to accomplish, and it's very effective in that manner.
All good. So Amanda, how have you seen engagement? You run the sterilization committees and specialize in that now. You're responsible for all the standards, but have you seen engagement increase over the years that you've been here, the workload? I mean, it seems pretty busy out there to me. So say a bit about sort of where they are, and then I want you to pivot to HTM, because you can kind of introduce that topic for us and some of the things that we're working on now, because I think everything both of you are sharing about sterile processing, we believe, all of us around the table and in the building probably believe, Now it's time for health technology management, clinical engineering to take the same path, right? So say a little bit about the current state of sterile processing and then segue to HTM.
Yeah, one of the really great changes that I've seen in my time at AAMI over the 7 years that I've been here is an increase in the number of clinicians that are involved in the development of standards. So the folks that are working in sterile processing departments, facilities really want to have a voice in the standards that they're held accountable for. And one fringe benefit I've seen is also career mobility as well. So if you know that facilities are aligned and harmonized across their practices because they're using the standards, and you have a professional who knows the standards inside and out, that gives a little bit of employer confidence if somebody is seeking a new job, they want to relocate, or they're looking to advance. So that has been a tremendous benefit to this profession, and one that extends to other professions such as HTM. And we have a lot of work going on in the HTM-oriented committee, which is AAMI's Medical Equipment Management Committee, or AAMI EQ as we call it. We have one big document that's under revision now, which is EQ 56, and that's Recommended Practice for a Medical Equipment Management Program. There's one that's published, that's EQ 89, Guidance for the Use of Medical Equipment Maintenance Strategies and Procedures. That will eventually probably come up for revision soon. And then a few others that are kind of on the docket, one for alternative equipment maintenance, and there's one for an HTM program as well. So yeah, a lot of work going on there, and we really want to see more folks involved, and really want to encourage the HTM community to help elevate their profession by contributing to these standards and add their voice to them.
I've seen in some of the other areas too, in sterilization, also in the industrial side, is that once you become involved in these standards, you can have your basic ones, but people come up with more identification of where there's gaps. So it can help drive new documents, it potentially can drive amendments and updates to current documents. So the more people that you have involved that are really vested and knowledgeable in this area, it helps improve the overall standards offering by creating different levels of documents for different types of needs and applications. So it seems like there's a lot of opportunity there.
It is the users that drive the work product, right? So I think some people don't understand that. It's not AAMI sitting around staff saying, we should do this. It's coming from the field.
But to pick up on the point that Janet and Amanda are saying, early on it was like a lot of industry, a little bit of regulatory, and we really struggled to get users, meaning the like people from, and so over time, it takes time for standards to be adopted, right? So these new standards, HTM standards, and the most important thing is the involvement of the people from the healthcare facility, and then get buy-in from the healthcare facility, their employers to participate. So it really has strengthened what the products that we're producing, because we've seen a great increase in participation by sterile processing professionals, and HTM, I think, has the same opportunity. So.
Well, certainly, I mean, we're the professional home for HTM professionals, right? And they certainly are at exchange in droves. They participate in their certification programs, their training programs. But it does need to catch up on the standard side. So say a little bit about that. So for that HTM professionals that's watching, wants to know, what am I signing up for? Just say a little bit about what the work is like, the kinds of things you're doing, what to expect, how to maybe convince your boss that it's a good idea.
Yeah, there's, for me, in my introduction, I sort of alluded to that, is honestly working in standards has been the highlight of my long professional career. And the reason is because it's a unique opportunity to allow you to interface with, I'll say, the entire market, all right? So it's not only users like yourselves, but it's also industry, the companies that produce the products and the equipment that you work on every day. We have regulators. FDA sits on these committees. There's nothing else, especially from an industry standpoint. You don't really have the opportunity to interface with FDA in this way. And then a lot of experts, right, who previously worked for either industry, sometimes previous FDA, sometimes a lot of previous healthcare professionals. So it gives you this just really unique opportunity over a day or a few days, or like this, 4 days, to interface with people and develop professional relationships with people you would have never had that opportunity. It makes it really gratifying. And then the other aspect is you just know you're doing the right thing. Yeah, you're doing the right thing to drive the profession forward. You're doing the right thing for the best interest of the patients. You're doing the right thing to help address some of the major issues in healthcare, like cost containment and all of those things. You're right at the front, and you're part of what's making or creating that solution to fix the things that need to be fixed.
Yeah, no, well said. And kind of go back to kind of asking what's the time commitment. And you know, it's really, it's something that you can scale to. So I think Janet and I never thought that I would, standards is now my passion. Now, believe 20 years ago, are you kidding? So I got,
so
I just talked my personal experience. Early on, I was involved in just a couple work groups, when they were related to, activities that we were involved in. And then all of a sudden, somewhere along the line, got very passionate about AAMI and participating further. But you can scale it to what makes sense for you. And, as your career ebbs and flows, you may not be able to spend as much time, but it's really, you really can participate a little bit at the start and learn about it, and then all the things that Janet was talking about, what you're able to influence. But I can tell you that it does infect your soul for a lot of people.
It's good work, like you were talking about. I mean, you're really doing good for the world in that. So say a little bit about the folks, Amanda, that want to get involved for the first time.
Oh, sure.
How do they find out about the committees that might be available? If they want to propose a work item, they see a gap. Just a little bit about that.
Well, let me piggyback on a little bit of what they said first, which is that participation in standards development has both an aspirational and an educational component to it. So we know that some folks will need to elevate their practices, and they learn a lot throughout the process. Yeah, so we have, it's very easy to join a committee or a working group, particularly if you're a clinician. It's just a simple matter of completing a committee application and sending it to us, standards@aami.org. And you can always find out what the work is that's going on in the groups by checking Standards Monitor online or reaching out to us directly. So
and all that's available on the website, AAMI.org,
yes.
so they can click
the
on standards, and there they are.
There it
okay,
is.
perfect. So I want to close out with one thing I know is coming up, which is I think you two are planning a session at Exchange in Long Beach.
That was supposed to be a secret, Robert.
Was it? Well, that's why we have
let out.
editing software.
So we've had an idea that it may at an exchange be really interesting for people, for us to share a little bit more of what we've been talking about here, of how do you get involved and why is that something that you should be spending your time on. There's such an opportunity in the HTM area to be able to elevate practices, have more influence in these things that the decisions that get made that affect your particular role. And so we wanted to present on that. We'll see whether or not we get accepted, although I think we might have a little pull.
We might have a chance.
You know some people.
I know some people.
You know some people that know some people.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll make it on the program, but we'll have a fun kind of tag team where we talk a little in more detail of those topics that we're talking about here.
I'm sorry
why
I blew
it
the
matters.
secret. Don't be mad at me.
That's okay. All right.
Well, thanks to both of you. We really appreciate it. And thanks, Amanda. And we'll grow the heck out of this in the coming years. It's good for the field. Thank you.
Okay,
Robert.
great. Yeah, thank you.